Hey, Mike, what do you do if you're facing an emergency?
Run and scream.
That's the right answer. Hey, I'm Matt Robeson, and this is 5-Minute Finance. That was the very calm, level-headed voice of Mike Morton, our certified financial planner, the one who just gets you logical, easy to understand, implementable, practical answers on how to get things off your to-do list and move on with the rest of your life. And today we are talking about emergency funds. The standard advice, Mike, is you need 3 to 6 months of stockpiled money. That's the answer, right? We're done?
That's it, man. This has been 5-Minute Finance.
Right. This has been 5-second finance. All right. So in an emergency, or if you have a sudden financial need, that's what we're going to walk through today, like what to do, how to plan for it, how much you need, etc.
Yeah. How much cash do you really need? What's an emergency fund? How to think about it? How much do you actually need here in 2026? That rule of thumb, 3 to 6 months, Matt, I'm calling cap on that. I think it's outdated.
Interesting. And there's some other things you're going to go through here, right? Like there's a Joker fund in here. I love this.
The Joker fund. That's from our previous podcast, the Joker fund. So you got to look back in the feed for that. So the old rule, we're going to talk about a new rule, why the old rule doesn't make sense. We're going to talk about 2 piles, 2 jobs. We're going to talk about, is 18 months the new standard, the AI, in the AI era, where your money actually lives for this emergency fund, and when cash might become one of your bigger risks.
Ooh, I feel very titillated. But if you're not feeling quite titillated enough yet, then hang on for all of that, plus the listener question, which is about an accusation from a spouse that's
how dare they?
It's pretty pointed. This is a harrowing thing to hear from one's spouse. Also, our worth knowing discussion about a state tax break hiding in your money market fund. Ooh, sounds like that clown from It. And finally, our weekly one thing about taking a walk. Sounds nice. Should we get to it, Mike?
Short walk. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we're going to break down everything you ever needed to know about emergency funds in just a few quick minutes. Let's start with something you teased a moment ago, this idea of 2 piles, 2 jobs. What do you mean?
Yeah, so you got to be careful, because when people say emergency funds, they tend to conflate like what's an actual emergency versus things that are irregular, expenses that are irregular, but they're going to happen. Like your water heater is going to break and you're going to have to replace your water heater. I hope it's 10 years from now for you, but it's going to happen. That's not an emergency that we know is going to happen. And so this was the Joker Fund. You can look that up in the previous episodes. It was a great episode. But really what we want to do here is for true emergencies, and this is kind of the loss of a job is the classic one where like, I'm not expecting to leave my job. You suddenly lose your job. Then you have a true financial emergency where you need money available to cover expenses. So make sure that when we're talking about emergency funds today, this is the true, hey, I'm not expecting to ever have to spend this money, but if I do, I want it available.
My wife and I talk about this all the time about unexpected expenses, which are really expected expenses. It's like, oh, we didn't realize we were going to have to pay $800 to repair our car. And it's like, yes, we did. Of course we did. We pay a certain amount every year for auto expenses, and we pay our property taxes every 6 months, or maybe it's quarterly. I don't know. Don't prosecute me. So the point is, 2 piles of money. I love piles of money, but keep 2 piles of money for 2 different purposes, and don't kid yourself about what's unexpected versus what's truly unexpected.
There you go. Exactly.
Got a 5-minute task for this?
5-minute task, man. Making sure to open up your bank account app and create, this true emergency fund. Well, you can do kind of one of 2 things. If you need the Joker fund, for these unexpected, expected costs, go ahead and set that up. And then for this emergency, go ahead and set that up. Banking apps now make it super easy to open up other accounts, and then name it. Here's the tip. Name the account for what it's for. You can even, you can name it after the podcast, call it the Joker Fund.
And you don't have to have like a set transfer going in there. This is just set the money aside. Can it be like a one-time deal, or is it the kind of thing that you want to build up?
Well, okay, 2 piles of money, 2 jobs. The unexpected expected costs, the Joker fund, that you might want to add money every month. You might want to set up like some automatic stuff in there for these, a car repair, things of that nature, water heater, house expenses that are, unknown when they're going to happen, but you're going to have to pay $5,000 a year. So you want to sort of have that money in there. So you could do that one. And then the other ones for true emergencies, that should be a one-time set it and forget it. Because again, you shouldn't really, you hope to never have to spend this money.
Right. It's like buying fire insurance or whatever. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. All right, let's get to the heart of this here. We teased it long enough. 3 to 6 months. I feel like I've been hearing this ever since I gained any financial awareness whatsoever. It's like, always have 3 to 6 months of expenses stored away. And you're telling me that's bullshit. Why?
Yeah. Well, that kind of worked in the, previous decades where we had more stable careers and stable jobs, and and it's a nice rule of thumb because it's easy. Hey, 3 to 6 months, you just take out, hey, you'll normally spend 10 grand a month. And so I need 30 to 60 grand just in case something happens. What's nice about the rule is that it's an easy rule. So that's perfect. It's easy to follow. You can multiply your expenses, by the number of months and then just set that aside. But it's in reality, that's not the right number to use for 2 reasons. One, so we want to think about floor and runway instead of 3 to 6 months. Floor and runway. Floor being what you really need is to cover your expenses that you cannot get rid of. So if you lose a job in a true financial emergency, there might be a bunch of expenses you can get rid of, all right, that you don't have to spend, you like to spend. Things like, hey, we're going out to the movies, or we're going out to the concert, or whatever it is. You don't have to spend that money, you just like to while you have a job. But in a true emergency, you probably cut a lot of those things. So the floor is all your expenses that you cannot cut, like your mortgage or your rent, or the bare minimum grocery shopping, to feed your family, or school costs, like, hey, kids got to stay in school or whatever it is. So you want to calculate that. That's the floor. All right. So that's your monthly expense that we're going to start with. And then the runway is how long you want to keep having that go. So is that 1 month, 3 months, 12 months? And I'd argue in the new AI era, it's going to be a longer runway that you're going to need. So floor times runway.
All right. I want to follow up in just a moment on this new AI era, because it sounds really promising. Like we're all going to lose our jobs and maybe die. But speaking of all losing our jobs, I like hearing the speech, Matt, jobs aren't as stable as they used to be. It sounds like a precursor to me getting fired. I want to just stab at something though here. What kind of emergency funds are we referring to? Because the way I think I learned it was, keep it in a totally liquid source, like your checking account, not a really tied up source like an IRA, for example. But I think of it as there's liquid, illiquid, and semi-liquid. For example, I have retirement savings that are invested and they're in a target date fund, in a low-cost index fund, and they're semi-liquid. I could access them at any time. It's just that I would pay a capital gains tax for accessing those funds. So do those funds count, or do only funds that are in a totally liquid source count?
Well, now you're skipping ahead, Matt, because it is true that when you're first starting off, we want to hold that money in a true, totally liquid, not semi-liquid, semi-stuck. All right. Totally liquid. So in your bank, literally as you're in your 20s and you're building up this emergency fund, it's in your banking app. You've named it emergency fund. You're depositing money in there to build it up. And at some point you're like, great, I got my 25 grand. And in case I lose a job when I'm 28 years old, it's sitting right there in my bank. Now, as we get more sophisticated, Like you're mentioning, hey, I'm a little bit older. I've got retirement accounts. I've got sort of a bigger balance. This 40 grand of emergency fund is getting relatively small compared to, the 401k, the IRAs, my extra saving in my brokerage. Then in that case, you do not want to separate emergency funds into a completely separate account and fund. You need to think of it in your overall investments. Now, it still, in my opinion, should be in a money market account or a checking or saving or CD account. But that 50 grand that is your emergency savings is part of your overall portfolio. I like to be 80% stocks because I'm still accumulating. You can now count the emergency fund because of what we said at the top. You do not expect to spend this money. It is true emergency. You don't expect to spend it, so it can be part of the overall investment retirement portfolio.
Got it. Well, I want to keep, I realize I now skipped ahead of your kind of intended order here, but let's keep parking that AI era question for just a second here. So like, just going back to this idea of there's a floor and a runway. How do I figure out what those are for me? Like, is there again, we love 5-minute tasks. Is there a 5-minute task version of this?
Yeah, I would definitely go through 5-minute task for this one to figure out the floor is going to be pull some statements, the last month or 2 months of credit card and checking account. That's usually where everyone's got all their expenses coming out of. Just scrub through that and highlight, hey, here's something I can't get rid of. This is the mortgage. This is my rent. This is my groceries. Oh, but here's the Whole Foods grocery. I could probably skip that and just go to like the Stop and Shop, groceries. So you just kind of highlight all the things that you couldn't skip if you were truly, trying to cut way back. Add those up and there's your floor.
Got it. All right. And I mean, again, oh boy, maybe this isn't sort of like the order you had in mind, but what you really just set up is this question of like, there are trade-offs to all of this, right? Because you're talking about your overall savings. And part of what you just said in the first 5-minute task is that 80% of the job is just labeling, is just you being aware and being very intentional about, I know that I have designated emergency funds, and by knowing that, I'm not going to touch them and I'm going to ensure that they're there. But it says less about where they live. And the risk here is that you take those funds and you put them into a totally liquid place that are ready to go, but then you're missing out on savings and investment and interest. So like, how do you think about that trade-off?
That's exactly right. So the real trade-off there is inflation risk or the risk of cash. People love cash. And, it feels great. I've got 100 grand sitting like in my bank account. It makes me feel wonderful. And I want you to feel wonderful. But the downside of having 100 grand of cash is you are losing purchasing power to inflation. We all know cars, when I bought my previous car 10 years ago, was like 20 grand. Now they're like 50 grand. All right. So if I just had 50 grand of cash 10 years ago, that would have bought a couple of cars. Now it buys one car. So you're losing out on how much that cash is going to purchase, even if you're getting some interest on it. All right. So that's the real risk of cash. And so what I said before is really true. Once you've got some good savings in 401ks and IRAs and brokerage account and your bank account, which has had your emergency fund, you want to look at the big pie chart. Do not separate your emergency fund that's 40 grand or 80 grand from the overall, because you're also going to have some safe bonds and cash in that target date fund. That target date fund is 80% stocks. So you need to put the cash for the emergency fund into your overall portfolio so you don't have that drag and you're able to keep up with inflation.
Right. So there's like an intermediate place, but it's labeled. I mean, that really resonates with me, this idea of you're really making sure that you have that reserve so that nothing happens to it. And you're also making sure, you remember at the beginning of COVID when everyone started talking about, well, you need to have a go bag. But your point is, yes, you should have a financial go bag. But beyond that, there is this kind of realm of intermediate, they're invested, they're semi-liquid. They're not in the go bag. They're, and you're not undertaking this cash risk.
Yeah. Let me sum it up here. When you're young and just building an emergency fund, just lives in your bank account, great, build it up and get there. Once you've got a good portfolio, include it in your portfolio allocation. And Matt, I would keep it in liquid funds. I would keep it in the checking account, the money market account, the brokerage account, in cash, so that it is liquid, ready to go. I would not put it into the IRA, the 401k. That's not where your emergency fund should live.
And before we exit the topic completely, since we did tease it and put it in the parking lot, let's just talk about whether things have fundamentally shifted in the AI era. I'm not sure I understand what AI has to do with it, other than we're all going to be living atop a mountain of skulls. Why in the AI era are things different?
So things are a little bit different at the moment, and this shifts, all the time, but getting jobs is now becoming a little bit trickier, and losing jobs, people have the sense that it's happening more often. It is happening more often in some industries. So that's what I mean about the AI era. So this gets back to, in the AI era might be more likely to lose a job. So you're feeling like, geez, I can get cut at any time. And then finding a job could take longer. Because companies are really sorting out, how are we using AI? Where are we using it? Do I need to hire people? And again, this is like constantly shifting. So back to this is the runway. How long you got the floor, and now you need to figure out like, hey, do I need 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? What's my runway going to be? This dial in the runway, you can think of it like a dial. Hey, we've got two working parents that have very stable jobs. Say you're like, working as elementary school teachers, pretty stable. I'm in the union, like unlikely I'm going to lose a job. Great. You can dial it down. Maybe you only want 6 months. On the other hand, we've got one worker, one stay-at-home parent. They're in the tech industry that's getting totally disrupted by AI. People are like, we're at the water cooler and hearing the chatter of like, downsizing, right-sizing AI. You're like, maybe I want 18 months. Maybe the dial's going the other way for your emergency fund. So, look at the runway and the dial based on kind of where you are.
Well, I see that you had one more handy, practical, and very useful 5-minute task. But I don't want to do it yet. I don't want you to give it yet, because you also happen to get a highly related listener question this week. And I think the 5-minute task goes after the listener question. So should we move to our listener question?
Let's do it.
All right. As always, I'll remind everyone that if you're a client of Mike's, I suggest carrier pigeons. That's the technology of yesteryear. Send him a message by carrier pigeon. It will arrive in 1902, and he will get an answer to you. Otherwise, you can email at pod@mortonfa.com with your listener question. This is this week's, and obviously I can see that you've stored it up just for this episode. And it is, we keep 12 months of expenses in cash. That's the only reason I sleep at night. My spouse says we're bleeding money to inflation and we should invest half of it. Who's right?
You're bleeding cash. It's literally bleeding. No, I'm just kidding. The answer is...
yeah, I thought you were sucking up to the wife in that one. Yeah.
Bleeding cash. You are both. Congratulations. You're both right. We often say on this show, the sleep at night factor kind of trumps a lot of things. And I truly believe that. Of course, we don't want it to, you can't make sort of quote unquote like bad decisions for you or your family that are going to be, aren't going to be successful. Like, oh, I'm just going to spend this amount of money every month and run out of money in 5 months. Like that's not going to work. But I will say, as long as you've got a sound judgment on what you're doing and the future looks fine, kind of 50-50 one way or the other, the sleep at night factor definitely always wins. So if it makes you feel great having 12 months of expenses in cash, and it's not going to disrupt your financial future, great. That's perfect. I love that. Sleep at night. It's wonderful. We all need sleep. All right. The flip side is 12 months of cash, as we've talked about earlier in the show. It is losing purchasing power. Okay. Now, if the 12 months fits nicely in your overall investment portfolio, maybe it's 5 to 10% of your entire retirement fund. Remember, this is money you don't expect to spend. All right. So you're not going to spend this 12 months of cash. So if it's 5 or 10% of your overall investment portfolio, that seems like a pretty healthy balance. That seems great. If it's in addition, if you're like, well, we're in the target date fund, Matt mentioned earlier, we're in a target date fund, and that's got 25%, cash and bonds. And when I look at my overall brokerage, I got, about 25% cash and bonds. And I also have this 12 months sitting over here, this 150 grand, kind of sitting outside. That's too much. Now you have too much cash. Okay. When you total the whole thing up. So make sure you're taking a look at the total investment portfolio and make sure it's the right balance. And I love that you're sleeping at night.
And it sounds to me like there's a potential for a Solomon-like compromise here where maybe you don't keep 12 months in cash. Maybe you keep 6 months in cash and 6 months in one of these intermediate options that you laid out before. And, you're just lessening the hit. So there's probably compromises available.
There are compromises, but be careful.
Yes.
Be careful when your spouses.
For the husband involved, just let it go, man. Let it go. She's right.
Exactly. Just let it go.
And by the way, this is the 5-minute task, though, that can also help resolve this that I teased a moment ago. You did have one about trying to figure out, like, what's the floor, what's the ceiling, what's the runway, what's the right amount. And it was writing down a single sentence. What was that 5-minute task that can help resolve problems like this?
So you can write down a single sentence and put it where you remind yourself. And then you write it in. We keep 12 months of our fixed costs in cash because, and then write out the end of that sentence. All right. And that way it'll help you guys with, oh yeah, we're on the same page. This is why we keep the money. So for the spouse that's sleeping well at night, congratulations. That's why we got 12 months. And for the other spouse, it's like, oh, I understand. We have it because it helps my wife sleep at night, which makes our family life fantastic.
I love fantastic family life. That sounds like something that's very worthwhile. Speaking of things that are worthwhile, should we get to something worth knowing?
Let's do it.
I am really afraid of the Pennywise the Clown-esque setup that you gave me for the thing worth knowing that is lurking somewhere here inside a money market. I don't know. I'm very frightened. Would you tell us what this is?
So why are you so frightened about state tax breaks? This is an income tax break. So when you hold treasury bills or treasury only money market funds, they do not get taxed by your state. All right. So Matt, we live in the state of Massachusetts, has about a 5-6% income tax here in the state. So if you have 150,000 of earnings at, 3% or so, that's $5,000 of interest. And if you have $5,000 of interest that is not being taxed by the state, that's a few hundreds of dollars. So there's a nice couple of dinners out just by holding the correct money market in your brokerage account.
So the upshot is, if you're going to do one of these intermediate options and you're looking for a money market, you should check out whether your state is among those that does not tax these treasury only money market funds. And then you can take your wife out to dinner to apologize for the fact that you were so wrong about this whole 12-month issue.
That's correct. And all states will not tax the treasuries. So that's true. Some states already don't have income tax. So you're not really getting anything in that case.
Yeah, you could move to New Hampshire.
But if you're in California, it's like 10% state tax. So there you got a couple of nice, really probably half a dinner because everything's really expensive out there to go out to dinner. But
dude, I went in the wrong direction. I moved from New Hampshire to Massachusetts.
Yo, so dude, there we go. What are you doing?
Yeah. I don't know. I like taxes, man. What can I say? I'm a Democrat.
Hey, just all right. 5% salary cut, for this hosting job.
I still feel like you implicitly threatened me with firing earlier. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I've been thinking about an AI, I've been thinking about an AI host. I mean, I'm not sure. Like, that's why we're recording these, Matt. I could feed it into AI and just say, like, look, could you please copy Matt? And that'd be great.
The joke's on you. I'm already Matt GPT. All right, let's get to our one thing. All right. You want to give me electric shocks. I love it.
Electric shocks. All right. You need to go for a walk in the woods without the headphones. In fact, Matt, I got to tell you, I went for an evening jog last night. And when I go in the evenings, I don't wear the earbuds because it already kind of freaks me out to be like jogging through the woods in the evening. And I definitely need to hear everything that's rustling out in the woods. But that's what you got to do. You got to go without the headphones.
Besides avoiding those kinds of attacks, are there other psychological benefits to running or walking without headphones?
Absolutely. We've engineered boredom out of our lives. I love this experiment. It's this electric shock experiment. So Timothy Wilson at UVA, you probably might have heard this one.
This is so good.
So it's so good. He put people in a room, all right, with their phones and said they could do nothing but sit with their thoughts for between 6 to 15 minutes. And that's it. That's the whole thing. Beforehand, he'd give them an electric shock and ask if they'd pay money to avoid feeling it again. And they said, yes, I do not want to be shocked. All right. So yes, I would pay money to not get shocked again. He left them with a button in the room that could deliver the same shock. So now you're in a room, you've gotten shocked. You said I would pay money to not get shocked again. Now I'm in a room for about 10 minutes and I have a button and that can shock yourself. Otherwise you just sit there. You just sit there. Those are your choices. You sit there for 10 minutes or you can press the button. 2/3 of men shock themselves rather than sit there. Two-thirds, Matt. We're so anti-boredom. We've completely engineered it. We know attention spans have been cut in half like every 5 years for the last 15 years, down to just seconds. That's why TikToks are, super short. And so walking in the woods, without the headphones, increases creativity. Being bored is definitely part of human nature and really brings alive a lot of who we are. So that's why I recommend it. Get out there, experience. You have to experience it and try it.
On that, for Mike, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us on 5 Minute Finance. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to and rate the podcast. It makes a huge difference for my show. You want more? Find Morton FA on Substack. If you have a comment or question, please email pod@mortonfa.com. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. This recording is for informational purposes only and should not be considered for investment advice. Opinions expressed are as of the date of recording. Such opinions are subject to change. I cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of the data presented here.